it was hard for me to score because there did need to be a seriousness taken, and it was all very well for me to just want to kind of keep everything moving and pulse it all through and just, you know, keep the grease under the story. But the rest of the time, the rest of the time is great. But once we hit certain points, then I had to find sort of this other gear and it's not even a gear. It's like the difference between suddenly you're driving a tank and then you're sailing a boat.
Hey, John, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you all doing?
Good, good. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today on the Movie Podcast, and congratulations on your Emmy nomination.
Thank you. Bit of a surprise.
We're completely honored to be speaking with you today. We're such longtime fans of all of your scores, so this is just it's very exciting for us. It's very exciting for us.
Very kind.
I do have to mention that Goa from Born Supremacy is one of my most listened to songs at all, like completely. It's always on my top 10 at the end of the year. So thank you so much for that.
It's interesting to see what people kind of find in these things. Some of them are hard fought, and some of them, like that one, I think was just, I don't know why, but it just flowed.
It really did flow.
Yeah, I mean, most of them don't actually, but that one just popped out real easy. I don't know. It felt good.
We have to know though, where were you when you found out about the nomination?
No idea, actually. I didn't know that I thought I was doing a film, so I didn't know it was in that world, really. I didn't understand kind of where, streamers and films in streamers and things. So I was a bit surprised. So I think, it's the usual thing. You get an email going, or you get a text going, congratulations. And so I just look at that and I go, okay, well, fine. And I wasn't even thinking what it was for, like kind of and then my agent said, whoa, so your first Emmy. And I was like, well, why would I be getting an Emmy? So for still, but there's a film. It's like, no, it's so it took a bit of a moment to catch up, but it's very nice because I've never been in this world before, and it'll be really interesting to see what the experience of this is compared with Oscars and Grammys. I think it's closer to the Grammys, really. Lots of categories.
Now, John, I'm curious because I'm assuming we're in your studio right now. What's the waveform behind you above your head? I'm just curious.
So that is my son a few years ago bought me this for my birthday, and it's an artist who, you send him a waveform and then he makes a template, and then he uses a circular saw to cut the wood, and it's walnut, which is one of my favorite woods. And it's and I didn't realize what my son was doing when he asked me about 6 months before my birthday what my favorite piece of music might be, and I think I was just sort of, I was saying, well, if 4.5 billion years of chaos finally arrives from that, you finally get Claire de Lune, then it sort of proves that you don't need God. And basically that's what it is. It's Claire de Lune, which I think is one of the most perfect pieces of music. It's unfortunately been overused, and when you overhear certain pieces of music, they can be a little devalued, but that one never will be for me. I mean, it's just literally, its construction is as close to sort of I don't know, perfection as I can imagine.
It is a lovely piece.
Beautiful.
And I want to ask you, correct us if we're wrong as well. This is the first time you've ever scored a documentary?
Yes. I mean, I did something at the end of college in the 80s. I think was a documentary, and one of the first things I did in Hollywood was a docudrama, which was Endurance, which was produced by Terrence Malick, and that was, but it wasn't. It had a documentary section of it in the Olympics, but then the rest of it was dramatized.
Gotcha.
About the runner's life. So, have I done it before? Maybe a little bit. It certainly didn't feel like this one. This one felt like a real documentary.
And I'm curious for yourself, what was it about Michael J. Fox's story that made you want to join this project?
I was put in touch with the director, and he'd sort of thought of me because of I think he needed somebody to write music that was joyful, I think he suspected I'd be good at that, because his daughter was always going on about the score to How to Train Your Dragon being joyful. So I think I walked into this sort of with him thinking, I need somebody who's not done documentaries before and could take a sort of a different angle on this, because he didn't want it to feel like a normal sort of documentary score, I think. And so me being incapable of doing that, I kind of just walked in, and the first thing I said was, he played me a little scene with a bit of temp, and I said, why are you making me feel sorry for Michael Fox? Michael J. Fox he doesn't feel sorry for himself. I don't quite understand why you've got that music in there. And I think a light bulb went off, and he thought, oh yes, probably he's going to take the right approaches. So I kind of, I was primed by being cast sort of as something that Davis wanted, and then in watching the documentary, I found it very, very touching. I obviously watched it without any music, other than needle drops, without any temp score, because I was trying to do that and be an audience member, but let my inner ears kind of hear things. And it was extremely touching, and I just was amazed at a man that had found grace from through sort of pain. And it's a story we all will love to hear, and so it's that kind of great hero story, but done in a way that was really interestingly inverse, because he starts out as literally a cinematic hero, and it ends up as a sort of a more human hero than any film really could make him. He is in his own self that way. So it was a really interesting story to try and approach, but I found it very difficult. I didn't have that language, the transparency that's required, I think, for documentaries. I'm more bombastic than probably you want in documentaries normally, or at least more overt, I should say. So I had to calm the fuck down, and and Davis was very patient with me, but I just wrote a load of music to start with without picture, and then played it to Davis, and he liked it all, but he asked the very valid question, which is, how does that fit with the picture? And so then started the very hard part of the job, which was, does this fit picture, and will it fit picture, and why would it fit picture? And then some of the bits that you hear in the soundtrack are almost pretty word for word the same as these sort of ideas that came out, and a lot was thrown away because it would never be accepted by the film itself, would slough it off. So it was a difficult project. It was a very pleasant group of people to work with. Michael, the editor, and Davis, the director, and watching Michael as well. But I didn't realize how hard I think it became, because I got kind of lost in it in a way that I don't normally do. I can see structure much better in a written film than I guess I've never really sat and analyzed documentaries. I mean, we're all sort of aware of when the ones that really work, and then the ones that just feel a bit sort of flippant. But having said that, it's like I was saying to somebody earlier, when I did Born Supremacy, I realized I found, Paul Greengrass for the first time, and that was his first sort of Hollywood movie, and I'd seen his previous film, which was called Bloody Sunday, which is one of the most extraordinary pieces of cinema ever. But I didn't realize that he'd been a documentary maker on a show called World in Action, which was on every Sunday night, I think, on ITV throughout my younger years. And I used to watch many things that he would make, and without knowing him and knowing who he was. Very political, obviously, a lot of documentaries. But so I suppose Britain has actually got a very good track record of a lot of documentaries. They tend to be not film length, though. They tend to be sort of 50-minute sort of documentaries. The BBC used to make very good ones, and ITV. And so I've probably got a love of documentaries, but I've never really dipped my foot in them until this moment, and for very good reason. They're very hard.
But your work in this is so lovely, and I think that's one of the things that Shahbaz and I were talking about, is that the score, as you said, it's not very traditional what we would have heard in documentaries. It's not kind of guiding us emotionally all the time or telling us to feel sorry for Michael, right? Because he's not that type of person at all. So I think that's very reminiscent, and it reflects in the work that you've done as well.
Yeah, it was very clear that Davis did not want it to wallow, because Michael was very clear about that. There's nothing about Michael that as I say, it's like the one bit of temp I'd watched where they did indulge a little bit that feeling. It felt really wrong to me, just instantly. So there's a few moments where it was hard for me to score, because there did need to be a seriousness taken, and it was all very well for me to just want to kind of keep everything moving and pulse it all through, and just keep the grease under the story, because that was how he moves. He just moves all the time, and he's dancing through life. But the rest of the time, is great. But once we hit certain points, then I had to find sort of this other gear and it's not even a gear. It's like the difference between suddenly you're driving a tank and then you're sailing a boat. It was really strange. It required a sort of a shift of universe.
Right.
That's what it felt. There was no, there's no bad guy in the story.
Right.
None of the kind of the threads I normally can find in movies were there, but they didn't show themselves in any kind of way that I could find the attachment line to.
Right.
So it became harder and harder as we kind of got. So it kind of got the front of the movie and then the end of the movie, and the middle was very tricky. This kind of point where we reveal what we already know. I mean, I've done one movie before where you're writing music for a story where everybody already knows the ending, which was United 93. And that's quite interesting, is that you're writing, you have to be really careful that you're neither, it's not a question of being ahead of the audience or behind the audience, because it's a story that everybody already knows.
Right.
So it's something else. So it's a different dimension. That's what I found very hard. The audience was not discovering this as they went along. It was, but that was my job, is to make sure it felt like we were discovering this, even though it was a story we knew. Everybody had grown up with him. Everybody had seen the shows on TV, on the films. They knew about the Parkinson's. They knew he comes back. So it's a story that is already in the public's perception. The audience knows what they're going to see. And I think one of the things that I had to make sure pretty quickly was that the music helped say, this isn't the Parkinson's movie. It's a small part of this, really. I mean, it's the reason that we think of Michael now with great heroicism, but he doesn't see himself that way, and he's just a really, really smart, funny guy who just found a way to actually make his life even more significant.
Right. Absolutely. No, you're very right. And you see it as well. And we want to thank you so much for your time. But before we quickly wrap up here, you're getting the chance to also do the live action version of How to Train Your Dragon. Are you going to be approaching that differently at all?
That's, that is a really interesting question. And what I've said to people is it's either going to be the easiest job I've ever had or the hardest.
Absolutely.
Because I just, we'll have to wait and see. It's like, I'm not quite sure what it's going to be yet. I'm not privy to those conversations. And in a way, I'm trying to sort of stay away from it so that the first time I see it when it's put together, I'm an audience member, and
Absolutely.
I will try and sort of look at it that way. And then if a bunch of the old score is useful, then great. If it's not, we'll figure out how to do it.
Love it.
John, thank you so much for your time. You're absolutely lovely to speak with. We hope we get to talk to you again, and we're rooting for you at the Emmys. So
Yes.
all the best.
We have our shirts made already.
Very kind. Okay.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.